Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Friday, August 30th, 2024. The group Moms for Liberty holds a conference in Washington, D.C. We'll hear from the co-founder Tiffany Justice and former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, who was a co-chair of Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump's transition should he win the November election. Gwen Walz, wife of Democratic vice presidential nominee Tim Walz, responds to Donald Trump's proposal to have IVF treatment paid for, either by the government or through mandated insurance coverage. Senator J.D. Vance, Republican vice presidential nominee, reacts to Vice President Kamala Harris's first interview as Democratic presidential nominee that aired last night on CNN. The Federal Reserve's preferred measure of inflation rose in July year over year 2.5%, described by many analysts as moderate and adding to the expectation that the Fed will cut interest rates in September. Transportation Security Administration's second-in-command looks at the expected record number of flying travelers this Labor Day holiday weekend, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky fires the commander of the Ukrainian Air Force. That's following a crash of an F-16 fighter jet, killing the pilot during a mission against the Russian military. NBC News has a story about Campaign 2024. Headlined, "What's happening on the campaign trail today?" It reads, former President Donald Trump will rally in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, before he travels to Washington, D.C. to address Moms for Liberty. The nominally nonpartisan political organization, which started as a group of parents protesting COVID restrictions, has become a major political player in the Republican Party. Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff is hitting the campaign trail on behalf of Vice President Kamala Harris, speaking at campaign receptions in their home state, California, and in Aspen, Colorado. Harris and her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, did their first sit-down interview of the campaign yesterday. CNN's Dana Bash pushed Harris on her policy evolutions, prompting her to respond, "My values have not changed." That summary from NBC News. C-SPAN covered the Moms for Liberty program in Washington, D.C. The title they have given it is Joyful Warriors National Summit. Tulsi Gabbard was one of the speakers. She's a former congresswoman, Democrat from Hawaii, and former presidential candidate. She has endorsed former President Donald Trump for president this year and has been named a co-chair of the Trump transition team.
The message I'm carrying across the country is that this is not about left versus right or Democrat versus Republican. This is not about where you stand on health care or where you stand on, how do we solve the homeless challenges in our country. There is something that is far greater at stake that we have to remain focused on. Just as our founders did when they wrote those founding documents, they had fierce and public debates and disagreements on a whole bunch of things. They weren't afraid to hide it. But they came together around the core fundamental principles that define who we are and what makes this country the greatest country in the world. And those are the principles of freedom and liberty. This is our opportunity, and this is why I'm hopeful in spite of all of the forces of darkness and evil that surround us. The reason why they are escalating their tactics is because they're terrified of us. And so for all the attacks that Moms for Liberty gets, and I read about a lot of them, they show up in the headlines, and I laugh a little bit when I see them on the news because I know you guys. And the way they paint you, it's like, oh my gosh. But take that as a badge of honor and a pat on the back, because that means you are scaring them. And I encourage you to do what my parents have done. My dad's a state senator in Hawaii right now, and what they have showed me through their example is that in the face of hatred and darkness, be strong. Wear that armor of love and know that they are weak because they are driven by fear.
Tulsi Gabbard, former Congresswoman, Democrat from Hawaii, at the Moms for Liberty conference in Washington, D.C. Story from Axios reads, Moms for Liberty, co-founded in 2021 by Tiffany Justice and Tina Descovich, has championed the parental rights movement and policy changes seen in red states designed to reduce talk of race, gender, and sexuality in the classroom or school materials. It's been labeled an extremist group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. The group has gone beyond school board elections to focus this year on national politics, spending more than $3 million to engage voters in 4 battleground states: Arizona, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Georgia. That article from Axios. Here is Tiffany Justice this morning at the conference.
We recently wrote an open letter to all American parents about the dangers of a Kamala Harris and Tim Walz presidency. Consider this. Tim Walz has made his own state a magnet for minor children who want to change their God-given sex without their parents' knowledge. Boo is right. Kamala Harris was called one of the most far-left senators in U.S. history because of her voting record in Congress. Walz told a Florida teacher who believed parental rights ended at her classroom door to move to his state because he loved her position against parents. But it gets worse. Let me read you what one news outlet reported on Governor Walz, and just imagine this being implemented at the federal level. Walz's education focus is transforming the students' values, attitudes, and beliefs into the woke worldview. This indoctrination is called culturally relevant teaching and is woven throughout the Walz education program. Social emotional learning and restorative justice are 2 examples of how this culturally relevant teaching has been embedded into Minnesota's K-12 curriculum. It's important to note, since Tim Walz has become governor of Minnesota, that reading and math scores in his state have plummeted. His focus is social justice programming, not the future of our kids. Before I wrap up, let's talk Title IX. Moms for Liberty sued to stop this woke Biden-Harris policy from teaching gender ideology in public schools. Can you believe that they want to put boys on our girls' sports teams, boys in our girls' locker rooms, and boys competing against women in sport? Boo is right. Now imagine a world where Harris and Walz rule the whole nation. This type of radical woke ideology would be just the tip of the iceberg. Moms, dads, parents, we need to rise up again. If we care about freedom, if we care about liberty, if we care about parental rights, we have to fight this year just like we did in 2020. A Walz-Harris presidency would make 2020 school shutdowns and parents being thrown out of school board meetings look like a warm-up act. We are on the verge of a full-on federal assault on our parental rights. This is not a drill. Please recruit your friends, your family, your neighbors. Join with us. Join Moms for Liberty and help us to stop these dangerous and radical policies from taking over our country. We all watched recently when President Trump got shot. And he was right to say, fight, fight, fight. When we started this group, I said we were going to fight like hell for our kids with a smile on our faces, and no one fights like a mom. Moms, let me be clear. It is time to fight like a mother. Liberty and freedom are God-given. No government can take them away. Thank you, and God bless.
Tiffany Justice, co-founder of Moms for Liberty, at their Washington, D.C. summit today. They say they have over 130,000 members nationwide. Gwen Walz, the wife of Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, held her first solo campaign event today since the governor became the Democratic vice presidential nominee, running with Democratic presidential nominee, Vice President Kamala Harris. Gwen Walz was at an Educators for Harris-Walz rally in Manassas, Virginia. One of the issues she spoke about was Republican presidential nominee, former President Donald Trump, supporting having the government or insurance companies cover the costs of in vitro fertilization, or IVF. In a moment, we will hear from Gwen Walz, but first, here is that proposal from Donald Trump made yesterday at a rally in Potterville, Michigan.
I'm announcing today in a major statement that under the Trump administration, your government will pay for, or your insurance company will be mandated to pay for, all costs associated with IVF treatment, fertilization for women, IVF treatment. Because we want more babies, to put it very nicely. And for this same reason, we will also allow new parents to deduct major newborn expenses from their taxes, so that parents that have a beautiful baby will be able. So we're pro-family. Nobody's ever said that before. But the IVF treatments are expensive. It's very hard for many people to do it and to get it. But I've been in favor of IVF right from the beginning. You know, if you talk to them, they'll say, oh, he really doesn't like, they have ads like I'm against it. It's just the opposite. By comparison, they're against it. But I'm totally in favor of it. But we're going to do what I just said. We're going to pay for it. And it'll help families, because a lot of families can't use it. And a lot of the same families have been hurt so badly by their inflation. They caused the inflation. And we are going to pay for the IVF treatments, fertilization. They're going to pay for it. We're going to take care of it.
Former President Donald Trump, Republican presidential candidate, Thursday in Potterville, Michigan, near Lansing. At fertilityiq.com, they have this. According to Fertility IQ data, the cost of a single cycle of IVF runs around $23,474, depending on where you have it performed and what services you include. Gwen Walz, the wife of Governor Tim Walz, the Democratic vice presidential nominee, spoke about the Donald Trump plan today in Manassas, Virginia. She also talked about Republican vice presidential nominee, Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, criticizing teachers without biological children.
And they're coming for our reproductive freedom too, right? Now, I read that J.D. Vance said he was really disturbed by teachers who don't have biological children. Well, really? Well, for a long time, Tim and I were teachers who struggled with infertility. And we were only able to start a family because of fertility treatments. So this is really personal for me. And I think it is for millions of Americans. We do not take kindly to folks like J.D. Vance telling us when or how to start our families. So let me use my teacher voice. English teachers, you know what these babies are for. Okay, here's my Mr. Vance. How about you mind your own business? Okay, you don't have to put your glasses on, but try with me in your teacher voice. Mr. Vance, how about you mind your own business? Yes. And we certainly won't stand for Donald Trump trying to rewrite his record on reproductive health care. He tried that yesterday. Teachers, you can smell that a mile away, can't you? Yes. And in the classroom, we believe in telling the truth, right? So here are the facts, and there aren't any alternatives to these. Donald Trump is the one who took down Roe and put access to IVF at risk. That's a fact. And he's running on a platform that puts these treatments at risk nationwide, and that's a fact. But he knows that that position is wildly unpopular. And guess what? That's a fact. So now he is trying to convince us that he won't follow through on it if he wins. Well, we won't let him get away with it, right? And that's a fact.
Gwen Walz, the wife of Governor Tim Walz, Democratic vice presidential nominee, doing her first solo campaign event in Manassas, Virginia today. United Press International writes that Kamala Harris's campaign said on Friday it will start a nationwide bus tour on reproductive rights to make sure the issue stays in front of voters as the presidential campaign winds down its final months. The bus tour, which will feature some of Harris's most focal female surrogates, will begin Tuesday in Palm Beach County, Florida, the home of former President Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate, and ultimately travel to 50 stops in both Democratic and Republican strongholds throughout the nation. And a story from The Hill. Former President Trump said Friday he will vote against an upcoming ballot measure in Florida that would bar future state legislation limiting abortion access and overturn the state's current abortion ban. Trump, who has insisted that the state's current law outlawing the procedure after 6 weeks of pregnancy is too strict, told Fox News he would vote no on the measure despite those concerns. Story from The Wrap. CNN's primetime interview with Kamala Harris and Tim Walz drew nearly 6 million total viewers as the vice president sat for her first TV appearance since accepting the presidential nomination, according to Nielsen Fast national ratings. The interview, which aired as a primetime CNN special, ranked the network #1 in cable news, more than both Fox News and MSNBC viewership combined. That was from The Wrap. Here's part of that interview as the two candidates talk about their economic plans.
My plan for what I call an opportunity economy. I've already laid out a number of proposals in that regard, which include what we're going to do to bring down the cost of everyday goods, what we're going to do to invest in America's small businesses, what we're going to do to invest in families, for example, extending the child tax credit to $6,000 for families for the first year of their child's life, to help them buy a car seat, to help them buy baby clothes, a crib. There's the work that we're going to do that is about investing in the American family around affordable housing, a big issue in our country right now. So there are a number of things on day one. What about you?
Well, I'm excited about this agenda, too. As I said, the idea of inspiring America to what can be. And I think many of these things that the vice president's proposing are things that we share in values. And the child tax credit is one we know that reduces childhood poverty by 1/3. We did it in Minnesota. To have a federal partner in this, unbelievable, I think, in the impact that we can make.
You talked about, you call it the opportunity economy. You are well aware that right now many Americans are struggling. There's a crisis of affordability. One of your campaign themes is we're not going back. But I wonder what you say to voters who do want to go back when it comes to the economy specifically, because their groceries were less expensive, housing was more affordable when Donald Trump was president.
Well, let's start with the fact that when Joe Biden and I came in office, during the height of a pandemic, we saw over 10 million jobs were lost. People, I mean, literally, we were all tracking the numbers. Hundreds of people a day were dying because of COVID. The economy had crashed. In large part, all of that because of mismanagement by Donald Trump of that crisis. When we came in, our highest priority was to do what we could to rescue America. And today, we know that we have inflation at under 3%. A lot of our policies have led to the reality that America recovered faster than any wealthy nation around the world. But you are right. Prices, in particular for groceries, are still too high. The American people know it, I know it. Which is why my agenda includes what we need to do to bring down the price of groceries. For example, dealing with an issue like price gouging. What we need to do to extend the child tax credit to help young families be able to take care of their children in their most formative years. What we need to do to bring down the cost of housing My proposal includes what would be a tax credit of $25,000 for first-time home buyers, so they can just have enough to put a down payment on a home, which is part of the American dream and their aspiration, but do it in a way that allows them to actually get on the path to achieving that goal and that dream.
Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democratic presidential nominee, and Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota, the Democratic vice presidential nominee, part of their interview on CNN Thursday night. Story from Fox News. Republican vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance warned Americans not to buy Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris's policy positions during her first sit-down interview since launching her 2024 bid, as critics accuse her of flip-flopping on key issues. Vance slammed Harris's performance during the CNN interview on Fox and Friends, accusing her of only pretending to be more moderate to garner more votes ahead of the November election. That was the article from Fox News. Here's part of Senator Vance on Fox.
Pretty bizarre, right? So if you have the same values, why have you changed your mind on literally every topic that you previously held an opinion on? But I think it's important for us not to buy this. If you look at the way that Kamala Harris is governed, she's actually governed as a far-left person. She's just trying to pretend that she's not far-left now because, of course, she wants to win the American people's votes over the next couple of months. But if she does, she's going to do the same thing that she's been doing for the last few years. She's going to try to make it harder to get American energy from American territory. She's going to make it harder for us to drive down the cost of everything from food to housing. She's going to make it harder for us to enforce our border laws, and she's going to make more chaos and more instability around the world. So it's really absurd for Kamala Harris to sit there and say, well, I don't actually believe in any of the thing that I told you I believed 3 years ago. She has governed as a person who believes those things, and unfortunately, the American people are far off because of it.
Senator J.D. Vance, Republican from Ohio, vice presidential nominee of the Republican Party, on Fox News this morning. Axios writes that Vice President Kamala Harris is finishing the month with a narrow lead over former President Trump in the race for the White House, 3 new polls show. In a Wall Street Journal poll, Harris has the support of 48% of respondents and Trump has 47%. A Reuters Ipsos poll found Harris leading Trump 45-41, and a Bloomberg News Morning Consult poll in battleground states showed her leading by 2 percentage points. NorthJersey.com writes, after a fast-track process to find a nominee, State Senator Nellie Poe's bid to replace the late Congressman Bill Pascrell on the ballot in the 9th Congressional District this fall is official. At a county committee meeting held Thursday night in Wayne, Poe ran uncontested to fill the ballot vacancy created when Pascrell died last week. There were 464 committee members from Passaic, Bergen, and Hudson counties on hand. Party chairman from the 3 counties endorsed Poe earlier this week. Reporting from NorthJersey.com. Nellie Poe took part in a Meet the Candidates forum on Monday when there were other Democrats vying for the nomination. This was her closing statement.
First of all, I want to thank the New Jersey Globe once again for hosting this forum. Secondly, I just want to add that over the past 27 years, I've had the privilege of engaging with voters and successfully running for elective office over a dozen times. My deep understanding of our constituency, combined with my extensive experience, ensures me that I am prepared to hit the ground running. On day one, I take pride in my track record for delivering results, and I am fully committed to serving the residents of the 9th Congressional District. If elected, I will make history as the first Latina to represent New Jersey in the United States Congress. My proven record of tackling crucial issues, including making New Jersey more affordable, lowering the healthcare costs, ensuring good paying jobs, and strengthening our education system, demonstrating my dedication to addressing the needs that matter most. My experience extends beyond local and state level. As president of a major national organization, I collaborated with colleagues across the country on critical policy matters, including valuable relationships and networks that will benefit our district. Like my esteemed predecessor, Bill Pascrell, I am committed to upholding a legacy of service and leadership, upholding his legacy. Thank you,
Senator.
Nellie Poe, state senator, Democrat from New Jersey, at a Meet the Candidates virtual forum on Monday, and then Thursday night at a Democratic Party county committee meeting, she was chosen as the Democrats' nominee for the U.S. House seat 9th District to run in November, replacing the late Congressman Bill Pascrell. New Jersey Spotlight, with an article about this race, has this line: "This is a blue district with 40% of registrants Democrats, 20% Republicans, and most of the rest not affiliated with a party." Washington Today continues in a moment.
Hi, I'm Susan Swain. Campaign 2024 has evolved in some unexpected ways. And from now until Election Day, C-SPAN promises you unfiltered coverage of the candidates as they battle to win the White House and Congress. You may not know that C-SPAN is a private company that operates without a dime of government money. And like many media organizations, we've been impacted by cord cutting. This summer, we are asking for you to help support our unbiased political coverage with a donation. Here's the good news: 100% of your contribution, large or small, directly supports C-SPAN operations. And best of all, an anonymous donor has pledged to match your donation dollar for dollar. You can find out more at cspan.org/donate. Help ensure that C-SPAN's unique, long-form coverage of politics is here to stay. Visit cspan.org/donate. Thank you for watching, and thanks so much for your support.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. Inflation held steady in July on a yearly basis, writes the New York Times, and consumer spending was robust. Fresh data released on Friday showed the latest sign that progress toward cooler price increases remains firmly intact even as the economy holds up. The release of the Federal Reserve's favorite inflation number, the Personal Consumption Expenditures Index, showed that yearly inflation was 2.5%. That was in line with both the previous month and with economist forecasts. After stripping out food and fuel prices, both of which jump around, a core index was up 2.6% from a year earlier. That figure gives economists a clearer grasp on the underlying trend in inflation. That was from the New York Times article. Lael Brainerd, chair of the White House National Economic Council, was interviewed on CNBC.
We've now seen a string of monthly inflation reports that should give us confidence. Inflation is now running at 2.5%, and that is the lowest level since the spring of 2021 when you started to see that supply-related pandemic inflation surge. And that should give us confidence that the economy can continue expanding. We saw good numbers yesterday and good numbers on consumers this morning. The economy can continue expanding. The labor market can continue solid with inflation moving back to normal levels. So that is a very reassuring print this morning and consistent with what we're seeing in the markets, which is that mortgage rates have come down. They've still got some distance to go, but mortgage rates have come down. Market rates have come down. That's a good picture. Of course, still big affordability challenges that continue to be the focus of the president, the vice president, in terms of continuing to lower costs for American consumers.
Lael Brainerd chairs the White House National Economic Council, today on CNBC. President Biden posting on X, today's report shows inflation down to 2.5%, continuing at the lowest level in over 3 years. That's progress. Prices are still too high, and Kamala and I are fighting to lower them by building 3 million homes, lowering drug costs, and investing in record energy production. Congressman Tim Walberg, Republican from Michigan, posting on X, across America, hardworking families are paying the price of Kamalanomics. This inflation has eaten up savings and made everyday life unaffordable. The congressman attached a chart with a picture of a laughing Vice President Kamala Harris in the corner. And the chart says since Kamala Harris took office in 2021, motor vehicle insurance is up 54.3%, gasoline up 49.9%, transportation services up 38.5%, and motor vehicle maintenance and repair up 30.4%. Senator Rick Scott Republican from Florida, posted a video about the economy and the Biden administration.
Hi, I'm Senator Rick Scott. It's no secret that Bidenomics and Harris price hikes are crushing our economy and making the American dream feel out of reach. We can only fix this problem if Washington politicians face the facts, stop the tax and spending spree, and get our fiscal house in order. That's why I'm putting out a quarterly economic snapshot so that every hardworking American has a go-to guide to what's really going on in our economy. You'll learn the truth about the bad job numbers, the soaring cost of breakfast, and the rapid rate at which our nation's debt is growing. It's these kind of things that every hardworking American should know, because choices made by Washington elites are directly impacting your bottom line. As Florida's U.S. Senator, I'm fighting like hell to make our economy great again, so that every American can live their American dream. And with the right knowledge and your help, we can make that a reality.
Senator Rick Scott, Republican from Florida, posting that video. On Wall Street today, the Dow up 228, NASDAQ up 197, S&P up 56. Transportation Security Administration Administrator David Pekoski tweeting, "It's shaping up to be a busy weekend at airports with both the Labor Day holiday and the kickoff of college football season. If you're ending your summer with one last getaway, either to the beach, a game, or wherever, be sure to arrive at the airport early." He included a link to TSA travel tips. The TSA Deputy Administrator, Holly Canavari, was interviewed on the NBC Today show on Wednesday about the Labor Day weekend and the expected record number of flyers, 8.5% over 2023.
Air travel is back, and the volume is the highest our agency has seen in our nearly 23-year history. We are staffed up and ready to support. As reported, we're anticipating about 17 million passengers that we will screen through the system, starting tomorrow, Thursday, through next Wednesday, September 4th. And we are staffed up and ready to go.
I know, Holly, sometimes you guys are able to actually figure out which airports are going to be busier than others ahead of a travel rush. Do we know which particular airports this time around folks are going to be flocking to en masse?
Well, yes, and we work with our airline partners and airport partners, too, on travel projections, and we are ready. For TSA, you can expect, too, our wait times will be 10 minutes or less for pre-check passengers and 30 minutes or less for standard lane. And I also would like to mention that we also have our national deployment officers that we deploy when we might see some staffing needs in particular locations.
TSA Deputy Administrator Holly Canavari on the NBC Today show on Wednesday. AAA projects that Labor Day travel, all modes, will be up 9% versus last year. Associated Press reports from Kyiv, Ukraine, that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky fired the commander of the country's Air Force Friday, 4 days after an F-16 warplane that Ukraine received from its Western partners crashed during a Russian bombardment and killed the pilot. The order to dismiss Lieutenant General Mykola Oleshchuk was published on the presidential website. "We need to protect people, protect personnel, take care of all of our soldiers," Zelensky said in an address minutes after the order was published. He said Ukraine needs to strengthen its army on the command level. The dismissal came on the same day that Oleshchuk directed scathing criticism at a lawmaker who is deputy head of the Ukrainian Parliament's Defense Committee for her claims that the F-16 was downed by a Patriot air defense system. Ukraine has received an unspecified number of the U.S.-made systems. That was reporting from Associated Press. The Ukrainian Minister of Defense, Rustem Umerov, was in Washington today meeting U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin at the Pentagon.
Good morning, Minister Umerov. Welcome back to the Pentagon. Rustem, I want to congratulate you and all Ukrainians on celebrating your Independence Day last weekend. Ukrainian people continue to fight for your freedom, and despite Moscow's cruel waves of attacks on critical civilian infrastructure earlier this week. But let me be clear, it is never acceptable to target civilians. And Ukraine's resilience will help it prevail over Putin's aggression and atrocities. Rustem, your forces remain steadfast. They continue to fend off the Kremlin's assaults and to inflict major losses on Russian invaders. So make no mistake, the United States will not waver in our support for a free, secure, and sovereign Ukraine. Alongside some 50 of our allies and partners, the United States will continue to provide the critical capabilities that you need to fight the Kremlin's aggression. As you know, next week I'll travel to Ramstein Air Base to again convene the Ukraine Defense Contact Group for the 24th time. The Contact Group's members stand strong in our support for Ukraine, and the Contact Group's 8 capability coalitions are working toward Ukraine's long-term security. At next week's meeting, we'll push hard to meet Ukraine's urgent capability needs, and these include air defense to counter Russia's planes, drones, and missiles, along with more artillery and armor, and to help you build additional combat power. So I look forward to discussing how we can best support Ukraine today and into the future. Rustem, thanks for making the trip, and I look forward to a great discussion today and making even more progress next week at Ramstein. Over to you, sir.
Dear Secretary Austin, dear colleagues, thank you for hosting us today. This meeting is of utmost importance to us. The leadership of the United States has set a powerful example to encourage other partners to stand by Ukraine in this critical time. Dear Lloyd, I would like to thank you for your personal role in leading the Ukrainian Defense Contact Group. During today's meeting, we will engage in detailed discussions about the situation on the front line, including our vision, objectives, and plans. We'll also address Ukraine's critical needs, including necessary armaments, equipment, and training. Another area we can focus on today is Ukrainian domestic production. In the last 2 years, we have achieved significant progress. Ukraine has launched hundreds of new defense enterprises and can quickly manufacture high-quality weapons, ensuring prompt delivery to the battlefield. So we'll touch these topics by discussing and exchanging opinions. Your contribution is always valuable. Thank you.
Well, thanks again for being here. I look forward to a great discussion. Thanks, everybody.
Mr. Secretary, will you take your
Thank you, press, for leaving.
At the Pentagon, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin with the Ukrainian Minister of Defense, Rustem Umerov. The Pentagon meeting was mentioned today by the Russian Deputy Ambassador to the United Nations, Dmitry Polyansky, during a United Nations Security Council meeting in New York City. The meeting was called by Russia to discuss the U.S. and other Western countries sending weapons to Ukraine. Ambassador Polyansky also talks about Ukraine's military incursion into Russia. You'll hear the voice of the interpreter.
The Kursk foray of Zelensky is something I talked about in great detail 2 days ago. I'm not going to go into details now. There are Abrams, Leopards, HIMARS, ATAMS, the Russian, and then the Donbass region is being bombed and shelled. Yesterday, there was Ukraine lost its first F-16 that was supplied to it. So what exactly is left of the Kyiv regime that is facing utter collapse? Just one thing: having a direct confrontation between Russia and NATO, headed up by the US. Kyiv just doesn't have another plan B. For this, the easiest thing is to create a huge provocation like Bucha and accuse Russia of it. We warned about this a few days ago, that the Kyiv regime is planning for a provocation of a dirty nuclear bomb. But this is very complex, and carrying it out without Western backers is extremely difficult. So there's another option. So get permission for strikes far into Russian territory by using Western missiles. Washington and most other capitals have stopped at that at the moment. They do understand that this would lead to an enormous escalation that would go far beyond the borders of just Ukraine. And with all the nuclear power implications that would have. But Zelensky is the U.S. Is being visited by the head of the presidential Ukrainian office, Andrei Yermak, and Rustem Ermov, who is conducting meetings with representatives of the U.S. administration to try and convince them to lift restrictions on long-range strikes using American weapons into Russian territory. Colleagues, this is what the right now looks like. The Ukrainian head honcho has focused on escalation by attacking Kursk. So there's a question. Is he going to win thanks to the Ukrainian suitcase without handles, so to speak, and its allies and the U.S.?
The interpreter for the Russian Deputy Ambassador to the United Nations, Dmitry Polyansky, at today's UN Security Council meeting in New York City. Story from BBC News. Ukraine has urged Mongolia to arrest Russian President Vladimir Putin ahead of his visit to the country next week, his first to an international criminal court member state since the body issued a warrant for his arrest. The court alleges Mr. Putin is responsible for war crimes, saying he failed to stop the unlawful deportation of children from Ukraine to Russia since the conflict began. An ICC spokesperson told the BBC that Mongolian officials have the obligation to abide by ICC regulations, but clarified that this did not necessarily mean an arrest had to take place. The Kremlin said it had no worries about the visit, which is slated to take place next Tuesday. That was from BBC News. On the Middle East, from CNN, Israel's military said it killed 3 Hamas members, including a commander, as its offensive in the occupied West Bank entered its 3rd day. Stefan Dujarric, spokesperson for the United Nations Secretary General, gave an update today on UN aid efforts into Gaza.
To the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory, our colleagues from the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tells us that attacks on humanitarian personnel, missions, and humanitarian facilities are further limiting the delivery of life-saving aid in Gaza. The most recent attacks on the UN include the one that you're well aware of, the World Food Program, that took place earlier this week. OCHA warns that these incidents not only endanger the lives of aid workers, with this ongoing crisis being the deadliest on record for the UN, but also limit the capacity for us to help more than 2 million people who are engaged in a daily struggle for their survival. OCHA says that today the Israeli military announced that they would allow the return of Palestinians and aid organizations into areas of Khan Yunis previously subjected to evacuation orders. This follows similar notice issued yesterday for areas of Deir al-Bala, which we told you about. Combined, these are the first such notices made since the beginning of the war. More than 85% of the Gaza Strip's territory remains impacted by 40 evacuation orders issued since last October, and that those have not yet been reversed. On a more positive note, with the latest announcements that return would be allowed, multiple aid organizations have had to relocate. On a positive note, with the latest announcements that aid return would be allowed, a multiple aid organization which had to relocate and abandon their premises are now preparing to return, particularly to the evacuated humanitarian hub in Deir al-Bala. Meanwhile, OCHA says that in August, the number of humanitarian missions and movements within Gaza that have been denied access by Israeli authorities has almost doubled compared to July. Between the 1st and the 29th of this month, out of the 199 planned humanitarian missions coordinated with the Israeli authorities for northern Gaza, only 74 were facilitated. The rest were either denied, impeded, or canceled due to logistical, operational, or security issues.
Stefan Dujarric, spokesperson for the United Nations Secretary General at a UN news conference. Times of Israel reports that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reportedly told Defense Minister Yoav Gallant that he was prioritizing his stance of maintaining Israeli troops in the Philadelphia corridor over saving the lives of the remaining hostages in Gaza. The stance was shared during a heated security cabinet meeting Thursday night, during which the premier had the top ministerial body vote to approve a series of maps drawn up by the IDF, which show how Israel aims to keep its troops deployed in the 9-mile narrow stretch known as the Philadelphia Corridor during the first phase of the ceasefire being negotiated. That was from the Times of Israel. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Subscribe to C-SPAN's free evening newsletter Word for Word, and you'll get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night and weekend, and a programming note that there will be no Washington Today on Labor Day. We'll be back next Tuesday.